Naruto began as a story about ninjas, very grounded in a mythology that seemed fairly consistent throughout the majority of the series. But a major criticism that emerged during the second half of Shippuden, which then exploded during the war arc, is that the suspension of disbelief became too much to ask of some fans, namely with the introduction of Kaguya and the Otsutsuki. And while I was reading comments on one of my videos, someone had a very interesting take. Gods, aliens, and the like were always true to the Naruto story from the very first scene depicting the nine-tailed fox attacking the Leaf Village. How is it that we can conceive of and accept a giant fox spirit as part of the story from the very first episode, but not aliens introduced in the final arc of the series? And while that is a somewhat valid point, I have a counter. If someone asked you what Naruto is about, how would you respond? Because I certainly wouldn't say it's about gods, aliens, or even the more mythological elements of the series. Naruto is about a lot of things. There's a lot of evolving subject matter, from one boy's quest to earn respect and change the world, to the corrupt nature of a flawed system that creates pain for many who live within that system. Is it about ninjas? Most definitely. Is it about gods and aliens? Perhaps. But I think the foundational question here is there any room for the story to be about both without alienating, pun intended, the audience or diluting what made the series appealing in the first place? When expanding the lore of your universe, it isn't always what you do, but how you do it. One of the very first things we are introduced to in the Naruto anime is the nine-tailed fox. And while it certainly is something extremely fantastical, it enriches the framework of the story Kishimoto is trying to tell. It organically fits right in with everything else, not just because we are introduced to it early on, but because as the series progresses, the tailed beasts are made to feel like they belong as an integral part of the plotline. They don't feel out of place, and we don't question it. Even if you could argue the existence of other tailed beasts being a retcon, it still works remarkably well. Contrast that with the revelation that the Sage of Six Paths is an alien, spawned from a rabid goddess who can shift dimensions, and Black Zetsu is actually the puppet master pulling the strings behind almost every major event in the series, basically invalidating Madara as a true antagonist in the process. Instead of enriching the framework of the story, it feels like it's replacing it, and it doesn't work nearly as well. This is what happens when expansion occurs without proper foreshadowing, a satisfying conclusion to previous plot points, and there's a sense that the ending is being rushed. Things that deserve more attention get tossed to the side unceremoniously, and the audience is expected to roll with it for the promise of something bigger or better. For many fans, however, the cost for this expansion is just too high. The series, despite still being great, is already suffering from the side characters being almost completely useless or non-existent in Shippuden. Characters we had grown attached to, who had incredible promise and potential, thrown to the wayside. And the most prominent antagonist that the series had established, that had become too powerful, had to be written out of the story by subversions that felt like a betrayal of the audience. It's not just the gods and aliens, but that they are the logical endpoint of this bigger equals better mentality that evolves and escalates a story so quickly and ferociously that it was sidelining so much of the main cast and altering the DNA of the series, even before Kaguya appeared. Although fantastical elements existed from the start, Naruto was fundamentally a series about human-scale conflict, and that was its narrative strength. Naruto worked best when its more supernatural elements were in the background, coming in occasionally when it would have the most narrative impact. The full escalation into gods, aliens, reincarnation, mythology, and superweapons ultimately strained the story's coherence and identity for many fans. Even Naruto and Sasuke's rematch seemed hyped up more so because it was fated to happen rather than any meaningful storytelling between the two of them throughout Shippuden. They're basically strangers by the time they cross paths again, and so much of the emotional connection present in Part 1 is absent. It feels like their personal battle was hijacked by these same elements that are too broad for the story, robbing it of the intimacy and replacing it with the weight of reincarnation, destiny, and prophecies. Many grounded stories contain supernatural elements while remaining contained, true to their roots and non-disruptive. And perhaps with more care, Naruto could have delved into this pocket of its universe, expanding without shattering the suspension of disbelief, or changing what made the series appealing to begin with. While the appearance of the nine-tailed fox in the first episode does suggest there is more to the ninja world than just humans and their conflict, it always served as a catalyst for lore expansion, the village political dynamics, and a power for Naruto to master while overcoming the isolation of bearing that power. It better serves that purpose more so than implying space aliens or gods that showed up at the very last minute and turned the series into something else. This is why I believe part 1 of Naruto is peak Naruto, and the first half of Shippuden is also a worthy successor. And while the second half of Shippuden is still good, I find it to be the weakest in terms of cohesion, consistency, and polish. The story evolved in a way where a lot of the fights lost what made them interesting, relying on the spamming of overpowered jutsu than martial arts. Also, many of the promising characters got sidelined, the plot points and subversions felt generic and predictable, and the evolution of the series as a whole felt somewhat incompatible with what came before it. But that's just my opinion, and I believe all of this may just be subject to personal taste, which is why I want to ask you, how did you feel about Naruto's direction towards the end of the series? Did you like it more, or did you like it less? Were you like me, still interested in the decisions being made, still enjoying it for the most part, and way too invested to not see how things ended regardless of your issues with the direction? And did Naruto, for better or worse, feel like something completely different to you by the time it ended? Leave your thoughts down below, please leave a like and subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.